I'm Anna Marie Cox. And Dan, does your TV get all 3 networks?
And PBS, Anna. Don't forget PBS. Hi, I'm Daniel Dresner. And a pretty girl interested in politics?
Welcome to Space the Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of
social identity theory
and the butterfly effect. Today we'll be talking about X-Men Days of Future Past, which is available to rent. Well, actually, I think all kinds of places, but yeah. I rented on Prime, and apparently so did you.
Yeah.
In the next few weeks, we'll be talking about A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Day 1. We are always taking suggestions. Unfortunately, there's kind of only one place you can give them, which is on our Discord. And we will talk more about that in a second. Dan, I just want to say, you forgot to put in that we're talking about Wolverine and Deadpool again, but I also am beginning to think that I'm forgetting about them. And that we should just, even though that was the inspiration for hot sci-fi crossover summer, boy, like this movie plus rewatching Deadpool, boy, oh boy. Like, I don't know, Dan.
You're starting to have some doubts. You're starting to, like, worry.
Remembering how annoying I find Ryan Reynolds. And, like, I guess I was sort of thinking, like, oh, he's not that annoying. But he's pretty annoying. Like,
we will have to...
He's like, I know he's playing it for... I know he's playing the dude bro thing for laughs.
Yeah.
But I don't like dude bros. So, I don't know.
First of all, someone who's not about... I have very little dude bro in me. Good to know.
No, very true.
Yeah.
We wouldn't, this podcast is
I would say there's a reason why you chicked me for a podcasting partner.
Right.
But I will say, like, I don't know, the original Deadpool had its charms. I'm curious to see, it's been a while since an MCU film came out, so I'm actually kind of curious to see the extent to which this actually works or not.
Right. And I'll look at Deadpool 2, and I've heard that it ages better.
Yes.
But to return to how people can give us suggestions.
So,
Dan,
there's this very old, that dates back to the feudal era concept called patronage, in which, you decide to become a patron. So if you go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/SpaceNation, you become a patron for as little as $3 a month. You can be part of the conversation. You can join the Discord network, which we have, which is wonderful. Lots of fantastic people on there. Some great conversations. Also, you can offer suggestions about what we might want to do in the future. You also get access to our monthly AUAs. You get access to our special episodes. We just cut a special episode about something that had nothing to do with sci-fi and poli-sci, about the new Apple Plus series, Presumed Innocent. It's like a mini-sode, but, we might do those a little more from here on in.
Yeah, we're interested, especially now, summertime, where Dan's not working. And I'd say that specifically.
I'm not teaching.
Him.
Yes, that's the better way to put it.
Since Dan has the summer off.
Fuck you. How dare you trigger me like that? How dare you?
If you are already a patron or for whatever reason will not become one, please tell your friends and neighbors, rate and review. And also, you could buy things from the people that advertise on the show. That is another thing you could do, because I can't remember when we started taking ads. We've now made a tiny bit of money from it.
Hundreds. We've made hundreds of dollars, Anna.
We now have ads. And I know that was Dan's plan all along.
Anna, just because capitalism stumbles and loses its way, Anna, doesn't mean it's lost forever.
Boy, howdy. You speak the truth, my brother. How many times can that happen, really? Like,
it stumbles a lot. Yes.
Boy, oh boy.
But I do like the idea that, like, right, you and I, like, I'm the Professor X of capitalism and you're the Magneto of capitalism. That might be the best way.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes. And I will take being Michael Fassbinder any day.
There you go.
Like, that is... I'm plenty okay with that. I like Magneto, too.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, before we move on, since you're not working, checking in. How you doing? How you spending your free time?
Despairing for the state of the nation? It's been a bad week. I'm sorry. I don't want to talk about this too much, but Holy shit. We are recording this, in the day after
July 2nd.
Yes, the Supreme Court ruling that suddenly says presidents have numerous get out of jail free cards, as it turns out. It's an insane ruling. And also, 4 or 5 days after honestly, the worst presidential debate I've seen in my adult life. Just honestly scary behavior from both Trump and Biden.
Might qualify as worst one ever. I mean, I don't know. Like, obviously, there's very little record.
Right.
Yeah, past a certain date, but it was
bad.
Oof. It was tough. And, I was going to mention this when we talked about the Discord. One of the things that the Discord has been for people is I think, really wholesome replacement for that other kind of social media, that other platform that we no longer use anymore.
Yeah.
And people have been on the Discord kind of sharing, just commiserating, I guess.
The highest compliment I would pay our Discord is that it's like Reddit minus the assholes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not for everybody, perhaps. I do think you have to have a kind of political alignment that would be familiar / comfortable with what we talk about. But it's a good place. Yep. Lately, we were talking about how difficult it is to immigrate to other countries. And I will just say that situation it's true. It is more difficult than you'd think. It's expensive. And our discussion really reminded me of the Dorothy Parker poem that ends with "You might as well live." And I would just say the ending would be "You might as well live here." And while I think doomerism is an important part of the healing process, I think that to be bereft, to experience great sorrow and grief over the things that have happened is actually kind of important.
The only thing I would add to that...
And then you get to a place after that.
I would say, the thing I would say is that, like, again, it was a bad week, but, there are... People still have agency, and there are things that, there would be other things that would have to happen for truly Gotterdammerung, and we're not there yet. So I would like, ideally people
like I said, I think
choices that avoid that.
Different personalities. But for me, acknowledging that, like, despair is important to get past it.
Yeah.
And getting past it and to just know that, like, this is a feeling that passes. Like, I can experience this despair. Dan, you've been with me through some really tough shit. And I think maybe you've seen that one of the most important lessons I've learned is that you can feel utter despair and that there's something on the other side of it. And the way I have to say utter despair is to know that this feeling passes.
The way I would put it is that you are one of the most resilient people that I know, because you've gone through some stuff. And you are stronger now than when I first met you. And that is, you were pretty strong then. So that's saying something.
Didn't expect to cry on a podcast about Days of Future Past. One of the least emotionally affecting films in the X-Men franchise. And they're none of them. Well, actually, Logan, I believe, is pretty affecting.
Oh, yeah, Logan definitely is. Yes,
powerful. Yes. But not this movie. So let's mention why we're talking about it.
Right. So again, this was my fault because, my hot sci-fi summer theme was let's do great crossovers. And this is certainly a crossover in that it involves...
This is certainly a crossover.
Yeah. And this is... That goes to the least you can do, yes. No, but this is a crossover which stars the original X-Men cast as well as the sort of prequel cast. And it was nice to see all of them together in the film, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah, and I remember enjoying watching this. And I still enjoed watching it. We've already done the least you can say.
Yeah.
I think. We know which section.
I remembered him watching this. That's good. Anna Marie Cox says, I remember watching this film.
Also, this is a crossover.
Yes.
It's pretty great. Yeah. This is a crossover.
Yeah. So, by the way, like I, as I said, I actually think this is a good film. I think I liked it more than you did. So,
Yeah.
This gets to the point of, will the podcast ruin it for you? And the answer is quite possibly. There are reversals of fortune in terms of the plot. There are cameos galore in this film, particularly in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So, watch it. It's I would say watch it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I definitely a laundry folder. Definitely something that you can watch with one eye on something else and not good.
Yeah.
Good. And performances, the cast is fucking
Oh yeah.
out of this world.
Yeah.
Like so good.
Mm-hmm.
And performances are all super solid. Mm-hmm. And now, Dan, I remember having previous experience. That's what I can say about it. Our previous experiences. I remember having previous experience with this movie.
I watched it in the theaters, I believe. The thing that I remember is that friend of the pod and my former colleague at the University of Chicago, Jacob Levy, helped hype it for me because he's now the Tomlinson Professor of Political Theory at McGill University. And I believe they shot a number of scenes at McGill. I think the set that's set in the future where like they're trying to bring Wolverine back in time, I think that's like a McGill classroom or something. And also, I, as a result, have genuine fondness for this because I think Jacob and I watched X-Men The Last Stand together. It was one of the last movies we watched before we moved on from Chicago. And hysterically enough, I remember the two of us thinking, wow, I guess the superhero thing's been tapped out now because there wasn't any on the horizon after that film. And we're like, well, because it was like 2006. I was like, well, I guess there's no more superhero films to be made. And we were that exactly. Yes, that's why I'm sort of laughing about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I that actually kind of gets us to story behind the story because one of the reasons this was made is that the original X-Men cast had not agreed to more movies, so they wanted to get the new cast members kind of established. This is not unlike actually the other crossover we just watched, which is Star Trek Generations. Right. And this is funny because Hugh Jackman is now holds the world record, like he holds the record for most portrayals of a single character.
Oh,
in movies. Like it's like
really? Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like he's outstripped like whoever was, Sherlock Holmes or something. Like I don't know who, but he's portrayed Wolverine.
No, I'm calling bullshit on this. And here's my answer. Desmond Llewellyn. I know this actor's name. He played Q in all of the Bond films, like from Connery through to Brosnan. And that is a lot of them, is all I'm saying.
Oh, you know what? I remember the caveat.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Superhero.
Oh, good. Okay, totally. Yeah, it's fine. Yep. Okay.
It's up there.
No, he's played a lot of, Also, a testament to Jackman that he can play a character who in theory is not supposed to age from the year 2000 to what is going to be 2024.
Yeah. It's 25 years of playing the same character. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. I worry about his body. I worry about him, Dan. I worry about what those steroids are doing to his mind,
you know what?
And to his like endocrine system.
I am not worried about that. Hugh Jackman seems like a delightful human being. He really does seem like the best of us. I will always. I don't know if you've ever watched if you've seen. That's why I'm worried, Dan.
That's why I'm worried.
Have you seen Taylor Tomlinson's most recent comedy special where she bids on Hugh Jackman's glove?
No.
It's very funny.
No. Okay.
But the point is, Hugh Jackman. Look, as a heterosexual straight man, that was nice little, just great way of phrasing it. Hugh Jackman is like perfection, right? Like this is a man who can look like he does in Wolverine, can sing and dance, is funny as fuck. He just seems like a genuinely, great human being. He is a standard for which all the rest of us schlubs cannot meet ever. He's a legitimate superhero, is all I'm saying. There
is a shocking amount of thought that went into a plot that makes no sense.
Much like Star Trek Generations, interestingly enough, yes.
Yeah, so the writer, whose last name is Kinberg.
Simon Kinberg.
Simon Kinberg. Said he did research on time travel movies and really thought through how this was going to make sense. Mm-hmm. And also there was some thought into making it fit into the continuity issues between the prequel. Which, I know you're laughing.
I'm laughing because
if you watch it,
the Fox X-Men franchise the continuity issues are ridiculous. I mean, if nothing else is
multiverse.
Yeah, it's definitely a multiverse because, among other things, this movie, you're not sure. It's far from clear, which timeline this is supposed to be happening in. It makes no sense.
And it also, if there's such things in multiverse, like one of those multiverses is fucked, right? Like it's anyway. It's been a long time since we traveled to Pennsylvania together.
Doot, doot.
People might already be expecting this, but the director of this movie,
Bryan Singer,
mm-hmm. is a problematic character. In fact, I think we can say he is a permanent resident of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, he's not leaving Pennsylvania anytime soon, I'm guessing.
Yeah. There's been enough written about this. I don't even feel like we need to go into it at all. Mm-hmm. He is a sex pest. That's the sort of generic term, but mm-hmm. one might say that's not even dark enough description. I don't want to get in detail. You don't want to get in detail. People will find out if they want to. This movie exists.
I would say I would only add a couple of things to this. First, the reason Bryan Singer is directing this is that he directed the original X-Men trilogy, the first two X-Men's, and related to this, Bryan Singer
X-Men's. I like that.
X-Men's, yes.
X-Men's. X's Men, perhaps.
X's Men, but it is. Let's put it this way: it is telling that Bryan Singer will be a member of Pennsylvania and is therefore surprisingly left in a situation where Brett Ratner is not the worst human being to direct an X-Men film, which is that you got to work at that. Like, that's all I'm saying.
Also, there's like a whole separate, I'm sure people have done podcast episodes about Bryan Singer and the issues that his participation in this franchise raised. And the interesting one is the IP issue, which is that he is permanently attached to this franchise. Like, because
of the IP. Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. Okay. So he's going to be listed as like an executive producer, probably for some period of time.
Also for, I guess, for the Deadpool and
for
Wolverine
future
movie.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interesting.
So, okay. So let's leave Pennsylvania. It's not a nice place to visit.
We had no choice but to go there, but we can leave now and enter back into the, we can go to the land
dark future. We can go into a dark future. Yeah. Still kind of preferable to Pennsylvania.
Yes, true. But we can go to, should we go to check the land of Chekhov now?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go to Chekhov's.
The land of Chekhov. There is a certain land he's associated with. But this is different.
Also a dark place at this point, just to point out. So this is the thing that often appears in the first act of the film that winds up being relevant in the third act. Anna, what do you have?
Chekhov's Colonel Stryker?
I believe he's Major Stryker in the...
Major Stryker. Yes, in this or in that?
No, in this. He's young version of Stryker. I mean, we only see the young version of Stryker. He's Major Stryker. I have Chekhov's Roberta Flack. The first time I ever saw your face. So,
Haha. Funny choice.
Yes.
And now, Dan, the plot, such as it is. Or actually, too much plot.
It's a lot of plot. Yeah.
An octopus of a plot.
Okay. All right, let's get to it. Act 1, Dark Future, Dark Past. Hey, remember 2023? What if it was actually worse than what you remember? In this film, AI Sentinels have hunted down most of the mutant population, as well as the humans who have helped them, as well as the humans with the potential to procreate future mutants. It's pretty bleak, Anna, and there is barely any sunlight. But Charles Xavier and Eric Magneto Lencher have a plan: to use Kitty Pryde's ability to project a consciousness into a past body as a means of stopping Raven, a.k.a. Mystique, from killing Sentinel creator Bolivar Trask in 1973, which was the critical juncture that led to this dark future. Wolverine, however, is the only one with the physical and mental capacity to travel that far back in time. Charles warns him that he is not the same man in 1973, and he ain't lying on it. When Logan arrives in the past and gets to Charles's mansion, he finds the school disbanded because of Vietnam. Charles is drinking pretty heavily and uses a serum devised by Hank Beast McCoy that allows him to walk at the cost of his telepathic abilities. Wolverine persuades Charles and Hank to help him. This will mean breaking Magneto out of the Pentagon, however, as he has been imprisoned there since being held responsible for the Kennedy assassination. Anna, I will say, as heavy as this plot is in terms of exposition, it's still a way better setup than last week's Star Trek one. But I will confess I was never entirely sure which timeline this was supposed to be. It does not track the first 3 X-Men films, so I don't know what I'm supposed to make of this.
You have to pretend that the writer has been beamed back into the past, and that we have no memory of the past as we know it. Wait, what?
This sounds better than mescaline, Anna. I mean, yeah.
one is behooved to not think too closely.
Correct.
About how this all works.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Including the fact that how do you pick out a single event, Dan? How do you pick out a single event that changes history? I think, I studied history, in undergraduate and graduate school.
Yeah.
There is history to what you do. Pretty thorough knowledge of history. Doesn't work that way. Like, nothing works that way. Like, even if you didn't know, hadn't studied history, it doesn't work that way.
All I will say is, it is a credit to Patrick Stewart that when he said this, I bought it. Like, when he said it was like, oh, okay, that's the critical juncture. Absolutely, totally. Again, Patrick Stewart just rocks in this.
We need to invent a new name for Mercury movie that is slightly more sticky than Mercury. It doesn't slide completely off your brain.
Well, what slides off your brain on this film is the plot, but the acting does not slide off your brain. Like, Patrick Stewart is good in this film, and we're going to talk about other good performances. Those I do remember. So, this isn't quite. You're right. The plot really doesn't make a ton of sense.
Oh.
Yes?
It is a version of the reality distortion field. I mean, obviously all movies have that, but the Steve Jobs reality distortion field, where while you're talking to someone, you're like, oh yeah, totally makes sense. And then as soon as they walk away, you realize, wait, no.
What did I just say again? No, hold on. Yes.
none of that made sense. Yeah. And that's this movie is while it's happening, you're like, yeah, okay. I believe it enough to go to the next scene with you. Right?
Speaking of which, let's move on. Let's get to Act 2, We'll Always Have Paris. Wolverine, Charles, and Beast pick up Quicksilver, a mutant with superhuman speed. Working together, they spring Eric from the Pentagon in a wildly entertaining raid. By the way, we're talking about Mercury. That is just a kick-ass scene. It's a well-done scene. Particularly
Evan Peters is fantastic.
Evan Peters is great. The super slow-mo where he's just sort of running around, fixing everything. Just it's the special effects in this movie are good. That is a great signature scene. So as I said, I agree with you that the plot is mostly Mercury, but there are things that you remember from this. Wolverine, Charles, Eric, and Hank jet off to Paris, and along the way, Eric and Charles hash out past beefs. Meanwhile, Raven is on her own, helping liberate mutants from the army in Vietnam. In the process, she learns about Trask's lethal experimentation on mutants like Emma Frost and Angel. She follows Trask to Paris, where everyone is heading to celebrate the signing of the Accords ending the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. In Paris, Trask meets with the generals from the Communist bloc and pitches them his anti-mutant sentinels and detectors. His detector, however, spots Mystique disguised as a Vietnamese general. She dispatches the others in the room and is just about to kill Trask when Xavier, McCoy, and Logan foil her attempt. Logan, seeing Major Stryker, has a PTSD episode that incapacitates him for a spell and wounds Kitty in 2023. Magneto grabs a gun and attempts to kill Raven, believing that this alone would stop the dark future. Hank fights him, enabling Raven to escape with only a leg wound. However, the fight spills out into the front of the hotel, publicly exposing the existence of mutants. Anna, I will say, this is the political side of me, and maybe this story and you'll disagree, but one thing I actually legitimately like about both this film and the previous one, X-Men First Class, is that they get the basic history kind of correct. X-Men First Class is all about the Cuban Missile Crisis. They actually bring up the Jupiter missiles in Turkey. Again, I don't want to say it's deep level history, but they actually get a fair amount correct there. And, the Paris Peace Accords in 1973 also correct. What did you think of the idea that JFK was actually a mutant and Magneto, the reason there's a curved bullet is Magneto was trying to save him?
Oh, yes. Not actually trying to kill him.
Not actually trying to kill him, yes.
Is what he says.
Right.
Well, Dan, everyone knows it's Henry Kissinger. That's
who doesn't appear in this film, actually. That was the only weird.
I was waiting.
That was a little weird, because Nixon gets a fair amount of screen time. There were opportunities to have Henry there, and he's not there. I was a little disappointed.
And it would be fucking hilarious to have him be a mutant. And for all we know, he was. He did live to be 99.
I think it was he was over 100, I think. Yes.
So he was probably the mutant. And what were JFK's powers?
I don't think he had. It wasn't discussed.
Yeah, no. It was mentioned. I can't remember exactly what they were. Yeah, I swear to God, Magneto mentioned them.
Was it super sexiness? I mean, I don't know what else, he would have had.
Magnetism of a different kind?
Given Kennedy, there you go. Yeah. I like what you did there. Yep.
Thank you. I did appreciate the emphasis on the peace accords, because like it is true that probably when most people think of the Vietnam era, that's not the thing they think of, right? Like, yeah. I also really appreciated, it's kind of debris field, but when Trask comes in and says, "Congratulations on your victory."
Yes, that was, I did laugh at that. And Peter Dinklage sells that line. It's a great line. Yeah, no, that was quite good. Yeah. Dinklage is fantastic in this, by the way. It's a great casting.
Yes.
All right. For those of you who are not our patrons, it's time for our advertisements. We'll be right back after these messages from Pepsi. If there's an apocalypse on the horizon, drink Pepsi.
You know where a Pepsi tastes best, Dan?
Where, Anna?
The ballpark. Cool, refreshing.
Oh, I like what you did there.
Wind in your hair.
I like what you did there. That was good. All
right, thank you.
All right, let's get to Act 3, Dirty Tricks. Trask takes advantage of the Paris attack to convince President Nixon to authorize a crash Sentinel program for a demonstration on the White House lawn to deter the mutants. Yes,
I gotta just say right here.
Yep.
Poor strategy on behalf of the X team to think that anything they would do at this point is not going to fast track the Sentinel program, right? Like any kind of disruption, unless they could mind wipe. I guess a Professor X mind wipes. That is the way that. Oh, why didn't he mind wipe?
Because remember, at that point in Paris,
okay.
at least, he doesn't have his powers yet.
Take it back. Anything they would do, even if they didn't attract like the crowd's attention, like killing the fucking generals from the communist bloc. I mean, what would that do? Like,
I don't think. All right, so hold on. To be fair, their intent was not to kill anyone, and
they do though.
They it was.
Don't a bunch of people die? Don't a bunch of the people at that meeting die?
No. Mystique sort of kicks them into. Mystique hasn't killed yet. Mystique knocks most of them out.
Yeah. Even then, like they've seen mutants.
Right, but the problem. Okay, so hold on. To defend Charles and Wolverine and Eric, remember they don't know at this point that the government knows about mutants. They don't know that Trask knows that mutants exist. It is Mystique that screws that up.
Interrupting, sort of like in a public way, interrupting that conference that Trask is having.
But they didn't mean it to be public. Remember, they're just going into a conference room.
You're not interrupting that conference.
Yeah.
At all.
Uh-huh.
With any kind of like busting in, right?
Right. Would have called attention to themselves, and then people would have figured out they were mutants.
Or especially if Mystique reveals herself like she did.
Right, but they didn't know that
the day they expected Mystique to not reveal herself?
What I think they thought is that they were getting to Trask before Mystique was ever there. I think that would be the hunch that I would put forward. Anyways, I got a lot of problems. I mean, the plot is not ironclad.
All right, fine. I'm gonna stop arguing this point. I think this is mainly just a butterfly effect.
Honestly,
problem, which is that anything why did they think that anything they could do would fix this particular thing?
Anna, I got to tell you, what I actually find far more unrealistic is that Trask tells the White House, "Sure, if you just give me a couple $1 billion, I will have these built for you over the weekend." Like in the history of defense contractors, that has never happened. So,
However,
yes.
In the history of defense contractors, the government keeps believing that bullshit.
Anyway, Trask builds the Sentinels out of non-metallic parts, but Magneto, having seen Trask's plans in Paris, hitches a ride on the rail cars and inserts metal into the Sentinels so that he can control them. Returning to New York, Charles decides to stop using the serum to regain his powers and locate Mystique. After failing at first, Logan lets him read his mind so he can communicate with his future self, i.e. Old Charles. Old Charles gives young Charles a pep talk, inspiring him to retain his optimism and protect mutants and humans alike. After using Cerebro to find Raven, he, McCoy, and Logan travel to Washington, D.C. to stop her from assassinating Trask at the White House event. Meanwhile, back in 2023, the Sentinels have located this little cluster of mutants and are launching their final assault. We talked last week about the Kirk-McCard meeting, which was kind of underwhelming, and admittedly, I'm not entirely sure I understood the plot mechanism whereby young Charles sees old Charles. That said, I don't give a shit because the acting in that scene works beautifully. Stewart is great. but James McAvoy just steals that entire scene. And it's what makes the movie as good as it is, because you actually really do feel Charles's pain in that sequence. And I love that.
Yeah. I think McAvoy and Fassbinder more than hold their own with two of the most,
best actors of their
actors. Yeah. I mean, going up against the Sirs.
Yes.
These two, perhaps future Sirs themselves, right? Like, are incredible. I also, Hugh Jackman is good, and Nicholas Hoult, who we've done a surprising number of Nicholas Hoult movies.
Nicholas Hoult is underrated. I would actually it's actually surprising to me. I think we should do Warm Bodies at some point because he's the lead in that. But there are very few movies with Nicholas Hoult as the lead. He is good in almost everything. I mean, and
he's got great comic timing. Yeah. He is able to kind of calibrate his charisma, if you know what I mean. In this role, he's relatively low key.
He knows when he's a supporting actor is the way to put it. In other words, he sort of knows, okay, I can't go full movie star wattage here. I'm just going to, and that works, and it makes the film better. And that's not all actors can do that. So that is true. Let's close with Act 4, just your typical White House photo op. Everyone converges at the White House. Mystique, disguised as a Secret Service agent, is about to shoot Trask when Charles senses her and stops it from happening. At that very moment, however, Magneto appears, activating the Sentinels and barricading the White House with the ring of RFK Stadium. Charles is pinned down by, just random metal. Logan tries to get to Magneto, but Eric pins him with rebar and jettisons him into the Potomac. Nixon, Trask, and a disguised Raven retreat to the White House bunker, but Magneto rips the bunker out of the building to kill everyone inside. Mystique, however, stops Eric with a plastic gun. She then aims her weapon at Trask, but Charles persuades her not to fire. This action breaks the timeline just as the 2023 mutants were either dead or about to die. When Logan wakes up, it's a much better looking 2023. Iceman and Rogue are together rather than Iceman and Kitty Pryde. Jean Grey, Scott Summers, and Beast are all alive, and Logan is employed as a history teacher. And it seems like nothing bad will ever happen to the mutants ever again, Anna. Anna, I agree with you on the plot stuff. It's kind of silly. But I legitimately like Charles's recognition at the end that the best way for him to persuade Raven to not kill was essentially not to persuade her, to acknowledge that he had been trying to control her this whole time, and that the only way this was going to work is if she actually chose on her own. Was that good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the ending is, for however jumbled the whole plot is, I think the ending packs a punch.
Yeah.
Because of the acting, for the most part. The performances really undergird it. I think also, we haven't mentioned Elliot Page as Kitty Pryde, who has a tiny role, really. But I remember first time I saw this, being compelled by her in terms of I was worried.
Yeah,
I was genuinely concerned that something was going to happen that would fuck this all up.
Right. No, I mean, when Wolverine claws at her, during his PTSD episode, we see Kitty struggling for the rest of the movie. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's
and that's small, but you need someone who can do that in that role.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a heavier weight than any of the people doing superhero shit.
Agreed. Yes.
Yes. Fun fact, Anna Paquin was supposed to be in the movie and was supposed to take the place of Kitty Pryde.
So she is in the movie, just to be clear. It's a small,
very, very end.
Small cameo that I don't think she even has any dialogue. But yeah, there's a rogue edition, I believe, of this film. Go on, Anna.
Yeah. That's all I was going to say. It's just interesting that they decided to jettison that for a movie that has bursting to the seams with cameos and, lots of stars. Yeah. So who knows how restraint entered into the picture for that particular piece of the puzzle, but mixing my metaphors, that piece of the puzzle, it's trying to stick with the metaphor. I don't know.
I will say, the way I would put it is that I don't think it's that they didn't want Anna Paquin to have a bigger role. I think it's that if you read what the plot would have done, it would have added another 20 minutes to this film, and that would have made the film 20 minutes too long. I think the more... again, what I'm actually impressed by is how, despite being overstuffed with cameos, this film is actually not all that long.
Oh, I was just saying, restraint. Who knew? At some point, restraint kicked in for these people. and I can't explain how it happened. Perhaps someone went back in time and showed them what the movie would look like.
Oh, I like that. That's priceless. That's good. Maybe. Yeah. Good point.
All right. Speaking of going back in time to make changes, Dan.
Yes, Anna?
Is there IR in this movie?
Anna, I think of how many years you've been asking me that question. All those years of us bantering back and forth on this podcast. And you know what? Those years weren't wasted at all. I like answering this question. No regrets. Particularly with respect to this film, which does have a fair amount of IR in it. You know, the most obvious IR in this film is the fundamental divide, and this is shot through the entire X-Men franchise, between Xavier's sort of Lockean approach to the world and Eric Lensher's Hobbesian approach. Which is to say that, you know, Xavier believes that, yes, there are people who want to hurt mutants, but that is not true of all humans, and that working with humans in a cooperative manner will be far better than trying to sort of pursue a war of all against all. On the other hand, Magneto thinks, no, this will always happen. We will always have to deal with prejudice. Better to seize power and, you know, make sure that we have autonomy of our own. I will say, by the way, in the films, one of the things that the film sets up very well is the idea of Lensher being a Holocaust survivor. It's a pretty decent motivation for why he winds up believing the way he believes. So, and I know a lot of folks now like to say that Magneto was right all along, but the thing is, in the case of this movie, I don't think that's correct, in that it is precisely the idea of Mystique killing someone that leads to this dark future. Magneto deciding, oh, you know, all I have to do is kill Mystique and I, you know, wipe out this future. He proves to be wrong as well. So there's something to be said for cooperation. I'm just going to point that out. Bunch of other IR going on here. The dangers of relying on AI in warfare. It seems clear that the Sentinels go way too far. A fact that maybe should have been anticipated before you unleash the Sentinels, you know, on human society.
Oh, Dan, I don't know. AI is fun.
Oh,
let's use it to replace people, just for simple tasks, like identifying mutants. I don't know.
So
it'll be fine.
I have to say, it is actually disturbing that we were like watching this to like occasionally, you know, watch television, see like commercials where like Idris Elba or some other celebrity saying AI is good. You know, AI is changing everything, and just like, no.
Yeah, Idris Elba, you know, the year before they replaced Idris Elba.
Right, before AI Idris Elba.
Idris
Yeah, exactly.
Elba.
There's the ad. Actually, it was my son Sam who pointed this out to me. I didn't realize I wasn't paying attention. There's some Gatorade ad with AI Michael Jordan that is deeply disturbing to anyone of Gen X, because it is the AI Michael Jordan is like Jordan of playing age Jordan. And it's like that uncanny valley thing where, you know, it's supposed to be Jordan. It doesn't quite look like him. It's a little freaky.
Wow. Yeah. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. Similarly, Trask believing that the mutants would unify humanity with a common enemy. He actually has this debate with Stryker at one point, you know, which I didn't mind that scene as a way to sort of explain where Trask is coming from. Although, that said, Trask saying that and simultaneously trying to sell the weapons to U.S. enemies didn't quite work out. Vietnam wreaking havoc on a private school? I am not buying that. This is an alternate reality. You know, anyone who knows anything about the way the draft worked in Vietnam knows that private school residents would have been sheltered. That's all I'm saying there.
Also, it's a high school, right?
Yes.
Like,
that's correct. Yeah.
I mean, if now, maybe what's going on is the Army swooping in and taking the high school students
for like a special program. Yeah, that was a little more believable. I'm just pointing out that like a private school like being worried about Vietnam, that's not quite right. And then finally, Nixon wanting oh, sorry, go ahead.
A private school being worried about Vietnam, I think, is fine.
Yeah.
A private school being decimated
by
Vietnam, that's what you're saying is like...
Right, that's the part that's not believable. Although, I will say, to be fair, I think in the bit of exposition about this, Hank also suggests that some of the teachers were drafted as well, which does make a little more sense. Finally, the most on-point IR in this film is Nixon in response to the mutants wanting a PR problem, PR solution. That feels very on point. The idea that he would have had a demonstration effect, you know, totally sounds like that's something he'd want to do. Also, that it would blow up, also, you know, not surprising.
Okay.
Well, I've blown Anna away.
I think you have interpreted Nixon's personality correctly.
Yes.
I did like a quick look at Wikipedia to see if it had a list of other movies that there was a fictional depiction of Nixon, and it's not a good, because I feel like there's some really good one that I'm not thinking of besides Dick.
There's Watchmen.
Oh yeah,
Watchmen.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Dan.
Happy to help. You know, but speaking of like different films and the commodification of Nixon, I have a question for you, Anna.
Oh, Dan, what is it?
Is there a critique of capitalism in this film?
Well, Dan, there's Pepsi in this film. And that is a critique of capitalism.
Boy, is there Pepsi in this film.
Pepsi is not okay. I mean, I believe it's the rallying cry of my generation, Dan. When someone says, we don't have a Coke, is Pepsi okay? Pepsi is never okay. Or rather, Pepsi is just okay. It is not sufficient. Mm-hmm. And perhaps I am revealing a place in which I am sympathetic to the way that, the market works here. Mm-hmm. Diet Coke is a superior product.
I was going to say, this might be the most neoliberal position you have on it, like what you're saying right now.
It probably is. Yes. That and the fact that I like Marvel movies.
Yep.
Like, Diet Coke and Marvel movies are my kryptonite to just go full superhero here. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that if Karl Marx had lived to see Diet Coke and Marvel movies, he perhaps would have had second thoughts about the communist revolution. I mean, they're pretty great.
Going back in time and trying to run that test would be fun. I agree. Yes.
Hey, Carl, here's a Diet Coke. Just have a sip. It's no calories.
This has no calories? No, I do not.
What do you think? I mean, Diet Coke is capitalism, Dan. Diet Coke is capitalism. It's fuzzy. It's delightful. It's not good for you. It doesn't have any substance. So it is both a victory for capitalism and embodies capitalism.
Bravo.
So Dan, do you want to hear a funny story about me and capitalism and pop? My undergraduate thesis. Oh yeah, my undergraduate thesis, winner of the Harper Award, University of Chicago. Yes, I had the best social science undergraduate thesis of 1994.
I can't believe I did not know this until now.
Yeah, that's how I got all my fellowships and shit for graduate school.
Wow, yeah. Pretty impressive.
Thank you. It was original research based on the archives of the 33-34 World's Fair at UIC. Mm-hmm. And it was about the use of clear products and design to try and sell science in the midst of a time when people were very reluctant to buy into automation and the way that science was proceeding. People had enormous doubts about the replacement of, manpower with robots and other kinds of automation. And the 33-34 World's Fair, I mean, this is just true. I found this out. There was an incredible amount of see-through houses and see-through cows and see-through humans and see-through autos and see-through. There was all this stuff. Did you say see-through
cows?
Yeah, built like a mechanical.
Oh, okay.
A mechanical cow.
Okay, sorry.
There was all these things that were built out of plastic that you could see the inner workings of, right? And so my kind of, postmodernist, you can make a text mean anything. But also I think there's something to this idea that if we could make people understand how this works, then they will be less afraid of it, right? And you can say that didn't work, but I found some correspondence in the archives where people are talking about using the fair to demystify science. The theme of the fair was science and technology.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that I'm sure when you were writing this thesis, that must have been the peak of. Do you remember there was this brief period where clear soda? Are you referring to
Zima and Crystal Pepsi?
Yes, Crystal Pepsi. That's
in my conclusion.
Nice. Oh my God. No wonder you got the Harper.
That is how I was bringing this back. Do you want to hear a story about me, capitalism, and soda pop?
And Pepsi, yes. Well done. Wow.
So
I still remember there was an SNL parody ad, I remember, that did the clear thing, except it was gravy. That's that.
I remember that too. I think I mentioned that also. I footnoted SNL.
Okay.
As I sort of got further into the piece and was doing conclusions, I talked about Mark Derry? I can't remember the name. Book about postmodernist architecture in LA, which is called All That Is Solid Melts into Air, which is a quote from Marx. And about how capitalism, the solidity of our culture kind of dissipates into reproductions and whatnot. Like that's where you keep going. And I talked about this way that we have seen clearness come full into our modern age, and we can parody it and whatnot, but people still thirst.
Oh. Oh, Anna. Whoa.
For clarity.
Oh, my.
And understanding, and the market provides a facsimile thereof.
Wow. You deserved every fellowship you got.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, all my professors were super excited for me to join the ranks.
Nice.
They had some very, very good recommendations. And then I had a graduate school, so here we are. Woohoo!
Speaking of which, this would ordinarily be the time where we talk about the least you could do and like taglines for movies. We've kind of done that already, so we should follow on to... It's time for Discordant Notes. This is where we take questions from our patrons on the Discord channel and answer them in the podcast. We have 2 questions this week. One is from Carrie, who asks, why does Magneto have such perfect cheekbones, such amazing moral righteousness, and such dumb plans? And my answer, Carrie, is that this is what happens when you don't go to grad school. Okay? That's what happens.
I feel attacked, Dan.
You went to grad school. No. This is not an attack on you. You went to grad school. You chose after that point that grad school is not for you, which is a perfectly respectable choice. But you tried. Okay? You gave it a...
So you're saying the only thing that Magneto and I don't have in common is dumb plans. I don't know if that's true, Dan. I think that maybe a year of graduate school...
I'm saying you could have had better plans than Magneto. That's what I am saying.
Okay. I would just say, because plot...
yeah.
That's
pretty much. That's a bit. Sure, that might be a more technically accurate answer, but I like mine better. Mine resonates better on it.
I don't know how graduate school keeps people from making dumb plans, because sometimes, Dan, graduate school is a dumb plan.
That's correct.
That's what a lot of people who dropped out of graduate school in the 90s could do to glut of people there.
God, I'm flashing back to that Matt Groening Life is Hell comic about grad school. Do you remember this? Oh, there's when he was doing the Life is Hell, it was this one panel about grad school, and all I remember is like there's the picture of meet the angriest person, like the most bitter person ever, and this was the grad school dropout. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, yeah. So yes. Imagine how much worse Magneto would be if he had dropped out of graduate school. That is what I have to say.
Ooh. Yeah.
And you froze,
fair.
Because I'm sure you would have laughed at that. That's what I know. What I think that you would have done. You would have laughed.
I did laugh at it.
That. Okay.
I did laugh at it.
All right.
The other question comes from Dan Brennan, who asks, would the idea of mutants have kept Nixon from resigning due to Watergate? I think the answer is only if he had somehow successfully accused Woodward and Bernstein of being mutants. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure he's gone still. Although, as it turns out, he had absolute immunity to do whatever he did. So, like, it was all in his official duties, at least according to the Supreme Court. So, maybe, what? Nixon would have traveled forward in time to try to get John Roberts back on the court in 1973. That it would have been like, that's the sequel to this. I just realized.
Yeah. And I will just suggest that another mutant president is the one that we just had, not current.
Oh, Trump?
Yeah, the guy who's radioactive, at least looking, according to like his glow. And I think that Nixon would have survived Watergate, and because one thing, the world doesn't rally around a common enemy, Dan, but I think we have seen that when Americans are presented with a crisis, they do tend to, the rally around the flag thing does happen. So If mutants are presented as a huge threat.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're presented as a... Okay, so two different things. Mm-hmm. If it works out that mutants are not a threat that everyone's like fucking freaked out about, and we're in this period where the polarization is not quite as extreme, he may not survive Watergate.
Right.
In today's world, I don't know if you noticed, Dan, but one party does really well when they demonize another group of people. So,
I mean, yes, but polarization limits the benefit. But it's terrifying to think how Nixon would have thrived in today's era. Let's put it that way.
Thrived. I mean, he'd be in his third term.
Yep.
So, yeah, on that happy note, let's go to...
Oh, God, it's pieces of RFK Stadium. What is going on? It's time for the debris field. This is the thing where, we bring up stuff that we have not mentioned before. Anna, do you have a lot?
I actually do. So why do AIs like pollution and storm clouds and bad weather? What is the deal?
That actually made no sense. Like, I mean, thematically, I get it. It's like, it's a dark future.
Like, it would be kind of funny too to have like a perfectly beautiful day,
right?
With all these people being like herded into.
In its own way, that would have been far more sinister, like a Stepford future, where like, there are very few humans and like most of the mutants are destroyed. That would have been good. This isn't exactly about the film per se, but I do have an odd question. Why is this the only X-Men film not available on Disney Plus? I was actually shocked that I had to like rent this, because when Disney bought out Fox, all of these films are now technically Disney property. It should have been on Disney Plus. I was a little surprised it wasn't. And all the other X-Men films from Fox era are available via Disney Plus. This is the only one that's not, and I have no explanation for that.
You have to get a copyright lawyer on that, Dan. I have no answers for you.
Yep.
So some of the things that I have in my notes, I don't understand why they are where they are. I wrote that twice.
Oh, they're like in China or something. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, how, and also how, when Professor X and the Wolverine and Magneto find
and Storm,
the new generation, and Storm, they just found him. Like, I mean, Magneto found him, but like, why would what? Have they never met them before?
No, they have. I mean, clearly, Kitty and Iceman knew Charles. The impression I got was that Charles was able to either use Cerebro or use his own telepathy to find them.
Had they just started using the Wayback Machine?
That's a valid question.
Like,
yes.
what?
Yes.
Like, why is this happening now? I guess even the where is not even really a question. It's just like, what?
What took them so long? Yes. No, I think that's a better way of putting it. This is not a big deal. I mean, it's worth noting. One of the things this film does really well is that it actually follows up from the other films. I mean, to the extent that it's a different timeline, it's kind of weird. But it takes bits and pieces from the other films. And like actors who had appeared in the other films like have little cameos in this one. Which means you don't necessarily need to have seen any of the other films to enjoy this one. But it is also undeniable that if you have seen those other films, it improves the experience of watching this film. This
is when Hugh Jackman wakes up in 1973. Yeah. Two things. One, apparently Hugh Jackman is the one that suggested that he be Commando in that scene.
Good for him.
Because as he said, in Australia, I'm not going to do the accent, but in Australia, when you wake up next to a pretty girl, you're not going to be wearing boxers. So good point.
I want to fist bump Hugh Jackman through the internet on that one. Good observation. Solid point. Yep.
But in that scene, he actually tries to explain time travel to the goons that bust in. Like, he seems to sincerely be saying to them, I am from the future. Don't you understand?
Yeah.
And that to me is also not in Wolverine's character. Wolverine would just bust out the bone blades and go to town. Why bother explaining? So, by
the way, I did like the bone thing. Like, that was a nice little moment where like he's surprised to see that it's just bone at that point, because it's prior to him getting the adamantium. And again, that was just a nice little, nice little continuity point. Speaking of which, I do want to say the costumes in this film, especially Jennifer Lawrence's, are spectacular. They dress Jennifer Lawrence very well as Mystique in this film. I don't mean her sort of blue, like, mutant thing, but like when she's like in disguise, like it's like the height of 70s fashion.
Okay, but on the blue mutant thing, I don't know why I've never thought of this before. But is that her skin? And if so, she's naked?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, all right, other people probably thought about this. Or is it kind of an exoskeleton? That's what I'm going to choose to believe. That since she can weirdly apparate other people's clothes, maybe it is just kind of a unitard.
Yeah.
Like, it is weird when she apparates other people's clothes. You have to admit. It's very... it is not... Sure. I don't know what the logic of in-universe is that she can also adopt people's clothes when she turns into them.
So two things on this. First, I don't know if you noticed, but in the scene where she seduces the Vietnamese general, when she morphs back into Mystique, the fur coat was clearly... the fur coat was an actual fur coat. Then she winds up, the rest of the clothes don't. The second thing is, and I think I read this somewhere, is that... apparently, a small note for Rebecca Romaine Stamos, who played Mystique in the original X-Men films. Apparently, when she did it, they had to paint the blue on her. But whereas by the time that Jennifer Lawrence got to play the character, apparently there was just a bodysuit that they put on her that was easier. So,
because I worry about the delicate parts of a woman in that situation.
I do think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not just, I don't think about them. I worry about them. I also want to say there is the hearing, I guess, where Peter Dinklage, Bolivar Task, is in front of, is it like a Senate hearing or something?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is a trope This is a trope in movies that anyone who's covered Congress is annoyed by, which is, that is not how it works. There are not dark rooms.
Yes.
Or there may be dark rooms. There may be dark rooms that I don't know about. But I don't think you have a dark room set up with microphones as though it's being recorded for some reason or amplified.
The only thing I was surprised by during this scene, Anna, was that Richard Schiff was not in it.
Bear with me here. Yes, but bear with me here on how little sense that makes.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
There are multiple microphones in front of Peter Dinklage because that is the way American thinks of as Senate hearings, multiple microphones. The reason there are multiple microphones at any Senate hearing is because multiple networks are recording it.
And no one's recording this secret
hearing.
There's
no one there.
But what I will say, I did, that, as absurd as that was, I did like that Trask bitterly mentioned that Congress had cut his funding when he talks to Nixon. That totally would have been on point. And I'm actually surprised, if you really wanted to be period accurate, it would have been Trask saying the Democratic Congress cut my funding to Nixon. That would have guaranteed.
There
you referenced this in the very opening, but I did like the Star Trek little shot of Star Trek where they time travel, and Hank saying, "I've got a device that records everything that goes on all three networks." That was legit funny. I mean, I
laughed too.
Variations of that joke have been told before, but that one, I don't know, was just incredibly well done.
We mentioned the great effects and sort of choreography of Quicksilver's Pentagon mess. And I just want to say something, which is that I guess there is an in-universe answer to this. That if he's listening, is he listening to a Walkman?
I believe he's listening to some sort of music, and it's Jim Croce's Time in a Bottle, which is a Chef's Kiss choice of song.
Why doesn't it slow down?
I have an answer to this.
Okay.
My answer is that I'm assuming that Quicksilver, not being an idiot, played and then pressed fast forward. So in other words, he's listening.
Okay, then there's a discontinuity. He has a Walkman in 19.
That I don't have an answer to. You're right. That doesn't make much sense.
I mean, I think there were transistor radios, but then it's being played on the radio, which means it would slow down.
Yeah, you're right. No.
All right.
Okay.
Never mind. Again, watching the movie, you're like, who cares?
Yes.
This is fun.
Again, that's one where the brilliance of the scene just outweighs the continuity thing.
Yeah.
My final thing, props to the actor Tai Hoa Le, who plays the North Vietnamese general. This actor is only on screen for 5 minutes. He had to speak 3 languages in those 5 minutes of screen time, which I was impressed by, and also comprehend a third. His scenes consist of acknowledging the Russian, speaking to him in Russian, then trying to proposition Mystique in French, switching to Vietnamese, and then speaking in English. It's an unusual thing. And actually, one of the things that this universe does...
Languages?
4 languages. Well, he doesn't speak Russian. He just acknowledges the Russian.
Oh, okay.
But it actually reminds me that there was a scene in X-Men First Class where Magneto speaks Spanish, German, and English within the span of 5 minutes when he kills the other former Nazis, which is the best scene in the film. But one of the things these films have, they're surprisingly cosmopolitan. And so I like that.
And then I have a few more things.
Okay.
Jennifer Lawrence is way too young for Magneto.
But wait a minute, hold on. We don't know how old Jennifer, like, Mystique is, like, ageless. So I'm not, like, it's almost like Wolverine.
Okay, all right, okay.
I think that's unfair. Yeah.
I have written down, Hank has seen a lot of reports, and I kind of remember this now. Like, he keeps on saying, like, I've seen reports about to Wolverine. It's in that same scene as I have all three networks.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think the all three networks line is so funny. Like, you kind of miss, like, he just keeps saying, like, I've seen reports.
I mean, he's expositioned up in a lot of the,
Yeah. I've seen
true.
reports.
Yeah.
And then Fassbender or Magneto in that hat and sunglasses when he goes to the Pentagon.
Yeah.
No need to be wearing those. There's really like not a reason. And
Actually,
he looks fucking fantastic.
Right. Also,
like, that is a fit.
No. I don't know if you remember. Also, like, that's a nice callback because that is the very first time in the first X-Men film we see Magneto in Congress. He's wearing that hat. So, like,
it's so good.
It was yes. No. But you're right. Like, it's one of those things where. You're right. It makes no sense, and he pulls it off.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Again, it makes no sense, and I don't care because it is fun while it's happening. Yeah. And then I have thousands of people at the White House. Like, you've been to the White House. Like, that lawn is not going to fit thousands and thousands of people. Fine. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're on the mall. Just fine. No one seems to notice RFK Stadium coming towards them.
Yeah, that was weird. You're right. Yeah. Totally strange.
And what were you going to say about the thousands of people at the White House?
Well, I was just going to say two scenes that I actually think are, again, incredibly well shot, very effective, and they're crowd scenes. The one in the Paris subway station where you see Magneto and Mystique talk, and also the scene at what I assume is Orly Airport at the time, where, like, Charles is sort of inhabiting different people to try to talk to Mystique. Again, it's like just good blockbuster filmmaking. Like, it could be a normal... That's like a necessary scene to have in a film. You're trying to just get through it, but it's done with such style and panache that it grabs your attention. Much like the scene where Magneto gets his helmet back.
And this is kind of gets back to another argument we've already somewhat just agreed to disagree. But wouldn't that whole White House situation still been a pretty big deal? Like, still.
No. I'm not disagreeing with you on this. Like. Basically, given what Magneto says in front of live television cameras about his attitude about humans, I'm not sure it necessarily leads to a great future. It's a real problem that way. Like, you needed a stronger thing of, like, Charles and Mystique saying, we will police our own. We will make sure that folks like him never do this again. That would have been a slightly more potent way of doing it, but yeah. Yeah, no,
like, Mystique just kind of walking off doesn't seem like a real victory.
Or for that matter, Magneto being allowed to escape. Like Magneto telling Eric or telling Charles, they'll never let me, out again. It's like, fine, go ahead. It's a little terrifying. The guy was prepared to mass murder everyone, being set free. So yeah, you're right. I think, Anna, what you're saying is that the movie's emotional logic works even if the actual plot logic does not.
Yeah. And isn't that true of all of us, Dan?
Yes.
Isn't that just the way most people are?
Yeah.
Or emotionally, it all makes sense, and factually, sometimes it doesn't. It's the vibes. I've been calling this the vibes election. Actually. Dan, we're not going to be able to avoid it. You know that, right?
I know.
Like,
I know.
That is the thing about this.
We can't go back in time. Wait, you mean you can't send me back in time to my former consciousness? We could totally change this.
Have you heard the joke? Joe Biden could now do the funniest thing ever.
Oh, he can sleep in a public place or something? What was it?
Oh, no. He could seal Team 6, the Supreme Court.
There we go. Yeah.
Like, immunity? Official act? Fine.
Yep. Actually, this does raise...
Robert signs his own death warrant.
Anna, this raises an interesting question, which is, and again, I'm not saying this terribly works because the plot in this film is not great, but if you could go back in time, what would be the like critical juncture that you could change that you think would have us on a better timeline?
Her fucking emails, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, if that report hadn't run, right? Comey. Like... And I don't even want I didn't even want I wanted Hillary to win. Not a Hillary Clinton fan. Like, depends on how far back you want to go. Right? Like, also, Hillary being the president instead of Bill, like, in the 90s. That would also have made everything different. Gore winning! or rather Gore taking office, I should say, not Gore winning. Like, there's a million different things. That's why this shit doesn't work. That's why, time travel is, it's funny that of all the science fiction kind of mechanisms that there are, time travel seems to be the one that has the most scientific basis to it in some ways, right? Like,
I guess. I mean,
there is something to work with on the science side.
I will say that all the crossovers we're doing for this summer involve time travel. So that in and of itself is an interesting observation to make.
I just can't believe I let you program a summer. I can't believe it. I can't believe I let
You're upset about the crossovers? Don't be upset about the crossovers. Crossovers are awesome. You enjoyed this film. Exley enjoyed this film. I refuse to. I'm not going to apologize for this.
Okay. All right. Well, Exley demanding my attention. Please become a patron. Rate, review, tell your friends and neighbors. I have a Substack that I don't do very often, but you should subscribe anyway, because I would rather have you read my stuff than not read my stuff. And also, I don't like polluting people's inboxes, unlike some other people here who just are like willy-nilly, like filling people's inboxes up with shit. Just opinions.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
All the time.
Wow.
People who think every opinion they have needs to be put in a newsletter.
Oh my God.
They're interesting. They're good. They're interesting. Sure.
Wow. Thanks, Anna. So I have a Substack called Dresner's World, but you can just go to the website. You don't need to subscribe to it.
Yeah. Right.
That's all I'm saying.
There should be digests. Can you get digests?
I don't know. Let me put it this way. I actually don't subscribe to most Substacks precisely because I don't want them in my email inbox. I agree with you on this. So, I know. I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah. But
right,
other people.
But podcasts are different.
Yeah.
Podcasts are different. Podcasts are on demand.
Yes.
That you cannot have them. They will not show up unless you want them to. Bitch. And ours is only once a week.
Yep.
Often. It is most of the time once a week.
90% of the time, we're once a week.
90% of the time, we're 100% on time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was the line. Yes. But coming up next, we're going to be doing A Quiet Place and then A Quiet Place Day 1. When it comes out, we will be doing Deadpool and Wolverine.
All right. And until next time,
keep this channel open for more.